All right. Well, welcome everybody to workshop C.2, I think we're calling it. Thank you so much for taking the time here this evening to come back in with us. The first item on the agenda will be the public comments. And I do not think we have anybody from the public in attendance, but I'll just open it up just in case I'm missing that. If there's anybody from the public that would like to provide a comment at all. Okay, seeing none, and I don't think there is anyone from the public joining us. We'll move right into item 4, which we just need just a moment for, and that is preparation for our sub-team breakouts. I think we're all pretty well aware of it now. We've getting to be old hats with this. The intent again for this evening is to wrap up the action review against the selection criteria. Each of the teams had made it through a number of the actions in our last go round. Round 3 teams, which are the water, green space, and climate economy teams, have met separately prior to this meeting to finish up their actions, which is fantastic. So we've just got the 2 rounds left. And I will say before we break into the subgroups, I just want to sort of give everybody a pat on the back. So we've done this with lots of teams, and every team always works a little bit differently. It's always an interesting experience to see how folks work. And I have to say that the way the Hartford team here has been reviewing the actions is very, very focused, very, very intentful, and I think a really super high quality job. So I just want you guys to know that you're doing an amazing job at it. Most teams approach it with good intent, but you guys are really doing it very very intentionally, which I think will result in really great product. So thank you very much for that effort. So just want to check in if there's any questions at all. I think we're probably set. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. Hopefully I've got
John had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Sorry. Can you review the process after tonight? What it seems to me is happening is we're going through the complete list of actions under the subheading that we're focused on. And if anything that's mentioned has a kernel of goodness to it in terms of proposed action, then we rate it. And it seems to me that we're going to have so many different actions. Oftentimes, it's a matter of wording, but nevertheless, the volume of actions that are being commented on seems to me to be overwhelming.
Well, that's a good question because that actually gives, we can refresh when we, at the beginning of the last meeting, we talked a little bit about, as you review, what I recommend is lean into them a little bit heavy. In other words, don't, if there's an action that, yeah, I mean, I kind of like this, but if it doesn't really seem like it sings, or like if it's really aiming in the right direction, and yes, it may need some wordsmithing to make it more appropriate, but if it doesn't really feel like something that's really strongly motivating you, then don't be afraid to rate it heavily. Be heavy on it. In other words, don't be afraid to whip out a 1 every once in a while instead of a 5. Sometimes that can be a little bit hard because, Everybody's trying to do a good job. We're always trying to do a good job as we review those actions. But I would say go ahead, feel free to lean in heavy on them, which will be part of it, because that'll give a good sense as to where the team is leaning in terms of actions that feel good and actions that don't feel quite as good. And so what will happen next is these actions will start getting reorganized in support of the strategic goals that we talked about at the beginning of the process back in January and February. And we will be organizing those. We will also then be starting to put these into priorities. So those actions which get really high scores will have a higher priority, like a #1 sort of priority. Those that get very, very low scores will end up sliding into what we'll suggest as the parking lot, which means that'll come off. It won't show up in the plan. They won't disappear forever. We can have them in the background if the town wants to, resurrect one of them, bring one forth, that can happen. So it won't disappear from history, but it just won't be a part of the plan. And somewhere between those will be actions that are still in, but will be identified as priority 2 or priority 3, which just is helping us in terms of organizing them on where we might focus our efforts year 1, year 2, etc. Our intent would be to have the actions whittled down to a somewhat manageable number. Now, because we have, there's 8 sectors of actions, there will be, there will be a number of actions, but when we look at each sector by itself, we want to make sure that the numbers of actions are as reasonable as we can all humanly make, and also then sub-prioritize those so that the priority 1 actions are definitely handleable, so that there's 1 or 2 priority actions in a given sector, for instance, in a given sector and strategic goal. So what we'll do to help whittle that list down is 1, when you guys are done rating them, we'll look and see if there's natural areas where the numbers naturally create divisions. Like, hey, there's lots of 1s and there's lots of 5s. Well, that's a pretty clear separation. But if there isn't real clear boundaries, we will come back and kind of create a suggestion on, hey, I would suggest in this sector, let's make a 4 cutoff or whatever. I'm just making a number up right now. And so we will come back with some suggestions about where to cut and create a boundary for those actions that definitely get put into the plan, and those actions that are going to be put into a parking lot that we'll have access to in the future, but won't actually be a part of the plan. The other aspect is that for those mitigation sections where we're looking for GHG reductions, we'll be doing some overarching modeling. And as we do the modeling, we also might suggest some tweaking here and there a little bit to try to make sure that we're improving the potential outcome for GHG reductions. And with that modeling, we may also then come back with another layer of suggestion about, this action maybe didn't rate super high, but it's going to be really powerful from a reduction standpoint. So we're going to suggest you reconsider keeping it in, or vice versa. Hey, this action got ranked, pretty good, but in terms of trying to whittle down our actions, and we want actions that do as much as possible, and we don't want to have too many actions, we might suggest some that we put into the parking lot category. And so at the next workshop, those actions will be reorganized, and we're going to color code them a little bit. So actions that we're suggesting go into the parking lot. In other words, they won't show up in the actual CAP plan, but they'll be available to staff and the community in the future for reconsideration. We'll just make those a color so that you understand what we're suggesting where those cutoffs are. And at that next meeting or prior to it, the teams can review that and indicate their comfort level. If we're suggesting something goes into the parking lot, but the team feels really strongly about it, then it won't go into the parking lot. It'll stay in the plan. So hopefully that answers that. So
when you say we, is that just pale blue dot, we.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that to be excluding. I mean, I'm happy to, collaborate just to try to help the team.
Well,
that's kind of our job.
If you put, so say the transportation subcommittee, and you went through the list that you developed in terms of priorities and things and asked us to discuss it, I would venture a guess that it would take us 2 or 3 more meetings to agree on all of those things. I mean, it's just the nature of committee work with people with different perspectives. So I think the more that you can focus us, the better it'll be. And my last question is, I just learned today from listening to a podcast that the governor is taking some of the federal money and putting it aside so that the state can develop a climate action plan. And I don't know that we've spent much time, again, in the transportation committee, to use an example, talking about what's appropriate for local action and what's more appropriate for state action. Is that a value judgment that you will make when you go through these things?
That is actually part of what our next workshop will do, where we will be looking at those actions. It's kind of like Survivor. So at the next round, all the actions that you look at tonight will still be in the spreadsheet, but some of them will be like red or something, where we're making a suggestion, hey, based on the rating and so forth, this one maybe falls into the parking lot. And then we'll start concentrating on those that seem to be really the short list, the ones that we want to focus on. And for those actions, then the question at the next workshop is going to be, who do we think should lead this action? And are there partners, potential partners in the community or other communities, other players, so to speak, that could be advocates or supporters or important partners to help get that action done. And so in that process, you will have the opportunity to identify, hey, this thing really is something that we think the town should not do. It should be the state or the county or whatever. And then barring that, as we go through after that meeting, we will also try to help identify if some things feel like perhaps that might be well suited for, the state or somebody else. We'll help flag those as well.
Okay, so there's a Council on Rural Development that has teamed up with GNAT, which is a television group of television stations, and a couple of the Vermont newspapers. And they're having a 10-week series on issues that are important to Vermonters for the future. The one for this week was energy. And that's where I learned about the allocation of resources for state climate action plan. They're soliciting public comments, and it seems to me that on the energy front, it might be very helpful if we could put together a few comments to submit to the Council on Rural Development, suggesting what we think the state climate action plan should contain. And they're targeting a summit to be held May 26th and 27th, I believe. So it would be helpful, again, if we were going to make those comments, if we did that prior to the end of May.
Okay, excellent. That's great to know. And that actually could be pretty good timing for us, especially if those comments are open through prior to the 26th, because by then we'll have a draft of the plan. And out of all of the work between now and then, we may create a really good collective sense of what collectively would like to suggest to the state. So that's really good timing.
Yeah.
Maybe when you have an opportunity, John, if you can share, if there's a website or a link or any information, you know, you don't have to do it now, but just at your convenience, if you have information to share with the team, that might be really great for us to get out there. You can send it to me and I can copy everybody, or if you want to send it out,
Okay,
whatever is good.
great. I'll
Okay.
do that.
Excellent questions. Is there anything else from anybody? Otherwise, I think I've got everybody lined up in the right rooms. I'm going to open them up and I'll wait a second here to make sure everybody gets into the right spot. All right, everybody should be able to join. Thank you very much. I'll be popping through the rooms.